morning, everyone. Hello, everyone. We're here. We're live again, Rachel.
Morning.
How are you today?
I'm great.
Great, good. We're good. We're looking forward to doing a live presentation or talk about stabilizers.
We sure are. We've got a lot of questions have come in, Gary.
We have got a lot of questions, and for good reason, because it's one of the most important parts of the embroidery process. So I'm assuming if you're watching us now, you are an embroiderer. Maybe you're going to become an embroiderer. Maybe you're interested in it. Maybe you've been frustrated with your results, or maybe you're just an expert. Who knows? But anyway, we should cover a whole heap of stuff today. It'll be quite useful. And the first thing I do want to do, though, is make a comment about what you're watching us on. So if you're viewing us on Facebook, there's about a 2-minute lag time to a real lag time. So my advice would be to go to, in the description on your Facebook feed, there's a link to the YouTube channel. So watch us on YouTube. It's much more efficient in real time, and you won't lose anything. So
they can just scroll down a little bit, and you'll see that there's the link there. Just click on that, and it'll take you through to YouTube. Yeah, it's a better feed. So if you can do that, that would be great. Otherwise, that was the only little bit of housekeeping I wanted to do. And I guess the first thing we should mention, Rachel, is that we have a lot of different stabilizers. We have a ton of stabilizers.
And that's about to grow.
It is about to grow. It's pretty exciting.
We are now going to be the distributor in Australia for the Dime products from the US. A lot of you would actually know that now. You've seen it all over our advertising and digital media. The product is arriving very soon. We're expecting it by the end of June, so the container should come in, but won't be shipping until after we get our stock take done. We're not going to get it unloaded before our stock take, so really relatively it's going to be 1st of July, I think, sometime after that, yeah. And we're going to touch on a couple of their products today too in the stabilizer range, which are really exciting, and then mostly talk about, answer the questions we've got and talk about the stabilizers that you really need to have and how to get the best results.
Well, I've got so many questions, I broke them down into categories.
Good.
So do you want to get started?
Organised as usual, yes,
okay.
Thank you.
So the first category I've broken down is design. So I'm going to read you all these questions.
Okay, yep.
And then obviously your amazing brain's going to give us the answers. So the first question was, what causes the outline to not match up with the design fill?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What products should I use and how many layers of stabilizer should I use? What is a good design and how do I decide which type of stabilizer to use? What stabilizer goes with what fabric and how to prevent puckering? Wow,
okay. So they're all really good questions, and in the process of answering one, we're probably going to answer all of them really. The first thing that was mentioned is what causes my outlines to not line up, and that's called loss of registration. So you've all had it. You've stitched something and you've realised you've got to the last colour. It might be a black outline or something, and it's just not lined up. Now that can be caused by so many different things, and stabilising is an important part of that. But it's not the only thing that causes it, Rachel. It could be a poor quality design, it could be badly digitized, it could be your machine's tensions are way too tight. So it's not always the stabilizer's fault, it's a combination often of all these things.
So many variables, which is why I say embroidery is a science.
Do you know what I'm going to start with? I reckon I dug out an old sample, and we were going to talk about this anyway, so we'll talk about it now because I think it does kind of answer a lot of those questions. Here we go. So many years ago, in fact, I had a customer come to me with a design. I'm going to put this under the big screen, under the vertical camera, and I'll bring it up in a minute. But she came with her machine and said, my machine's not working because I never get my designs to stitch out so the outlines are in the correct position. And so she had the design loaded on a machine. We stitched it out and it was terrible. And then, in fact, this was the best stitch out I could get on the design, and you might see down the bottom there, there's the shoe is not lined up. So there's a gap between the red and the black, and up around the green. And this was a really good result compared to some of the stitch outs that we did. And this was stitched out using a pretty standard woven fabric and a layer of iron-on tearaway and a floated or another layer of standard tearaway. So it's pretty well stabilized. There's no real puckering in the design. It looks quite good, except it doesn't line up. The problem with that design is the design was terrible. It had no pull compensation applied to it. So in other words, it finished all the 16 odd thousand stitches of the colours there, and I'll just go back up to the big screen again, the top camera. There we go. So it did all those stitches, and I think there was about 16,000 stitches in the design. And then it did the black. So what happens is during the process of stitching all the fill stitches, the design is pulling. You've all heard that term probably, pull compensation, and that's applied to a design when it's created by the digitizer. If there's no pull compensation, the design will pull on the fabric during the stitching process, and the last colour, in this case the black, it stitched exactly where it had to, except that the rest of the design had been pulled in. And no amount of stabilizer was going to solve that problem on a fabric stitch out. However, there's another thing called fabric displacement, which is another problem for embroiderers to consider. But I want to show you this to sort of explain the difference between this puckering from a result of stabilizer or lack of stabilizer and what can also happen. Now this is a bit hard to see. I'm going to go back to the top. This is the same design, but it's terrible. I don't know if you can see, it's all lumpy and fluty, and it just is a terrible result. But look at the outlines. They're kind of correct. Way better than the first sample. This has been stitched on a embroiderable paper. It was the old Kiwi paper. I don't think they make it anymore. I haven't seen it for a long time. But nonetheless, the outline is fine. However, the effect of the needle and the threads penetrating the fabric and pushing the fabric and pulling it around, it still has to do something. So instead of pulling the fabric as it would on a normal fabric, because paper doesn't stretch like fabric, it just displaced it, and it created a really...
It's really wavy. I can see that from here. It's like an undulating sea.
Exactly, and you really can't see it on the camera, but nonetheless, so that design will stitch on something that doesn't stretch or give or is malleable, but it will push everything into like this sort of wavy effect.
So again, the black outline will still stitch exactly in place.
Yes.
But on the paper, the fill stitches have pushed it up.
It's made it all wavy.
Yep.
The point I'm making there is that design cannot be saved unless you're really good at editing embroidery files. So you've got to know that you're getting your designs from a good source. That's a terrible design. It was digitized badly and nothing was going to save it.
So no matter what stabilizer you used, no matter what fabric you used, it was not savable.
It was not savable, exactly. So that's the first thing to consider is you've got to start with a good quality design. And you know, if you've been an embroiderer for a while, you'll know your suppliers that give you good designs, and
there's
some
a lot
are great,
of
some are
known
not.
brand names out there. Well, obviously we're not going to talk about them, but also ask your friends.
Exactly.
I know that we do get a lot of calls and support, Gary, from people who buy designs on Etsy. I'm not so sure that that's the best place to get embroidery designs.
You can be lucky, but you can also not. And there's no point going through the process of spending an hour, 2 hours stitching something without the confidence that the designer is going to give you a good result, because it's just frustrating and you don't get that time back. And often you'll ruin a garment or something because it's hard to unpick those sorts of things.
Test first, though, is a good...
Yes, test first. And that's a good way to test the right stabilizer too. So always a good idea to test designs. Now, just one other thing, speaking about that, here is another quick example of a design that stitches perfectly, and I know it because we digitize this, and I'm just going to put that back under the big screen. It's one of our current designs, and I don't know if you can see that, but it's perfect outline. Registration is spot on, and that was stitched with one layer of our soft away tearaway. I can just see a little bit still in the design, but here's exactly the same design stitched on the same machine, and I don't know if you can see down the bottom. It's not perfect, and that was stitched using a layer of cutaway. Now, I would always say cutaway is a great product to use, and probably if you had to have one stabilizer for the rest of your life and that's all you could have, you'd go with cutaway because it's going to do a lot more things. But even though that was stitched with cutaway, it still had a little bit of slip in the hoop, and I'll come back up there again. I'll just show you. And all we did to resolve that was we used our double-sided tape technique around the side of the hoop, which I will show a little later on. But the point I make there, a good design can be stitched well or it can be stitched not so well. And that's what we hopefully will get information, or this information will help you get those results. But you've got to start with a good design. That's probably the first key there. Now, other things that cause registration is, of course, if your machine tensions are too tight, it does pull the fabric in, and that's what causes that pulling and puckering effect, and your outline will not line up. So you need to make sure your machine is set well and you understand your tensions. We have videos that explain tensions, and it's not rocket science. This particular live is not about talking about tensions, but you do need to make sure that your machine is not stitching too tight.
Those are the basics for embroidery. Yep.
For all embroidery, absolutely, yeah. So now what was the next part of that?
I've got how to prevent the puckering. So is there anything else?
Well, a quick, easy way to do that, I'm going to refer back to the crab design that I just showed you. All I did to resolve the problem where we had that little bit of registration loss was went back to our good old double-sided 6mm tape, and we took the hoop, and you might be able to see this, I'll try and do it under the... We just wrap the double-sided tape around the perimeter of the inner ring. So if you're on a multi-needle machine, it'll be a different part of the hoop, but it's the same thing. It's the inner ring that you want to get it around. So you just wrap this all the way around, peel that off, and then just peel that tape off. I'll get it in a minute. There's an easy way to do that, Gary. There we go. Peel that off. Now, that tape is now all the way around the inner part of the ring. And when I have my fabric and stabilizer, if I was just to put this crab design back in there, just quickly, when I go to push that in, that tape that is now around the inner ring will prevent, or almost certainly prevent, the fabric from pulling as the designer is stitching. So that fabric pull issue becomes negated, and it just works a treat. It's a simple process. You do just need to make sure you open up your hoop far enough to facilitate whatever thickness of fabric that you've got. Don't ever, little tip, isn't it? We had one of these the other day.
Yeah,
don't ever
should have brought it in.
Don't ever really force your frame in so hard that you've almost got to get a mallet to knock it in, because you will break your hoop. So it's far better to release the tension on the screw and give it a couple of quick turns at the end if it needs it. But I have seen people with mallets beside their machines, and I've asked what those mallets are for, and that's the hoop basher. So please don't do that. That's a good way to break a hoop. But that tape will then stop the fabric from actually pulling in the hoop while you're embroidering. It's a magic little trick. If you haven't got the tape, it's on our website. It's a 6mm tape. We have a extra heavy tack and a standard tack. Either one's going to work. Yeah. Oh, here we are. Yeah. This is what they look like. Yeah. So that's them. We'll go that way. And they're inexpensive, a great product, and they will solve so many problems. So check those out on our website. Just search for double-sided tape. You'll find it. And yeah.
So then another question would be, what stabilizer goes with what fabric? Like, is there a one-size-fits-all?
There's not really. I mean, there's 4 basic stabilizers. Perhaps this is a good idea to talk about that. The 4 absolute key stabilizers that I think everybody should have, and we actually supply these in these little kits when people buy their first machine. And it's got the soft away tearaway, which is our version of our tearaway, which we love to pieces. It's got a standard medium cutaway. It's got a wash away stabilizer and a super soft topping. So let's just quickly touch on those. Tearaway is, our soft away tearaway is a combination of wood pulp and polyester fibers that is wet laid, and it's a beautiful softish kind of tearaway that doesn't perforate as easily as our old traditional type of tearaways, where you'd be halfway through the design, and because of the needle penetrations perforating the tearaway, the design would fall out of the fabric. So, and then you've got fabric flopping around everywhere. So soft away tearaway must have. And it comes in 2 fusible. You've got a fusible and a non-fusible. Because I know we use fusible a lot. Yes, I love the fusible, and we'll explain that in a moment. It's not in this pack, but I would add fusible soft away to your stash in a heartbeat. It'll be one of the saviours for you. The other product, the cutaway, there's an old saying in our industry, if you wear it, don't tear it. If anything worn shouldn't be torn. And what that means is that if we're creating putting a design on apparel that you're going to wear, you should gravitate to using a cutaway. The logic for that is a cutaway is going to last longer in the garment, so through all the laundering that you may do. We generally would say definitely use cutaway on a knit fabric because it is more stable. A lot of people then say to me, oh yeah, but I couldn't be bothered cutting away at the end of the design, and my advice to that is just get over it and get a pair of scissors, a nice pair of applique scissors or duckbill scissors or something, and cut away the cutaway behind the design once you're finished, because that then will give you longevity in the garment, and that's really, really important. The other thing, and I mentioned before, with tearaway, it does tend to perforate a little bit. You know, any tearaway will perforate a little bit. And in a knit fabric, that's the last thing you want, is the stabilizer falling out of the, or the design falling out of the stabilizer, because then you get flagging, and flagging of the fabric will create thread breaks, inconsistent stitching, registration loss, all sorts of things. So cutaway is an important one. And then of course there's the wash away, which is this guy here, and that's your, have we got the wash away out here? We should have some somewhere, maybe we don't.
Yes,
it's up here somewhere. Oh, there it is, there's our, that's see-through cutaway. There's the wash away, we'll pull that over here. So this is the one that kind of looks like a gauze, and this washes away in hot water, it disappears completely. And we use that for our making lace, making freestanding designs. It's also good on the back of towels where you don't really want a heavy stabilizer left in the design, and anywhere where you want the stabilizer to be there during the stitching process but not necessarily needed after the event. So wash away. And then of course there's the topping, which is the old water soluble, clear plasticky kind of product which we use on the top of towels and knits and shirts. I actually use topping a lot. If I was doing even on a woven shirt, I put a topping on because I like the fact that it helps, particularly for small lettering, keeps the lettering nice and crisp and gives it a little bit more, as it makes a huge difference. So those are the 4 stabilizers you must have. And I would also add the iron-on or the fusible soft away to that list as well as an absolute must have. And with that, I could pretty much embroider anything. Then of course the question is, why do we have all the other stuff? Yeah. Well, there's conveniences sometimes, right?
So I think we've got some questions coming in from our live audience.
Okay, yep, fire away.
So Ellen just has a question based on what you were talking about before. She wants to know if we believe that hoops can stretch over time if you're making them too tight.
That's a good question. I don't think they can stretch terribly far. The plastics, it depends on the brand, I guess, but the plastics in these hoops are quite rigid. They're more likely to break than stretch because of the rigidity in the plastic. It's not to say it can't happen, but I wouldn't think it's a major issue. And because almost all hoops have the ability to be tightened. There's a lot of thoughts about, you know, how tight should the hoop be when you're pushing your hoop in. I mentioned before, I don't want to have to use brute force to push my hoop in for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to damage the fabric, and secondly, I could break the hoop. So I much prefer to open the hoop screw up just enough so as I can firmly push my hoop into place, and then more often than not, I'll have 1 or 2 turns on the screw. Finger tight, I very rarely will I put a screwdriver to a hoop, but finger tight. Now, I've probably got more strength in my fingers than a lot of folks out there embroidering. But if you over tighten that screw, you'll break your hoop, and you could also, you know, damage your fabric. But equally, if it's not tight enough and you've got to force that hoop in, you'll do the same thing. One point
I would like to make though for Alan, and I think that this actually comes from experience. So over time, the more you use your hoops, the more you understand them, and you get a feel for how it works. And I think that is kind of gives you a confidence. So you might think that the hoop is maybe a bit more flexible or looser, but actually it's probably your confidence in using the hoop as well, and knowing what you're doing. Because I found that with quilting.
I think I agree. I think it's like anything you do. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and you'll probably take things for granted. But I got to say, I don't think I've ever broken a hoop.
I have never broken a hoop.
I've never broken one, and I know that for me, using that double-sided tape technique around the perimeter of the hoop is an absolute lifesaver. It makes a huge difference. and it just takes a lot of pressure off your hooping practices.
The other point that I want to make though is with these brother hoops, maybe you can hold the screw up. They are so wonderful to work with. I've used a lot of brands, and that being able to have that screw on that angle and being able to open it wide makes it really easy to hoop. So they're a lot easier to use if you're using this type style.
Absolutely, that offset screw is amazing. So, so I think that answers that question. I hope. Any other questions live at the moment?
There is one, but I don't pin.
We are going to get to that because
About
that's
pinning.
one of
We'll go to that later. Yeah, soon. So nonetheless, that hopefully answered.
I think that covers all our designs.
Yep.
The next grouping I've got is hooping and hoops. I mean, we've kind of started that. And actually, we will go to that question now because that was one of the first things. There's so many here, I'm not going to read them all out.
Yeah.
So let's start with the live one from Vivian, I think it is.
So Vivian would just like to know, do you pin the hoop?
I'm not a hoop pinner. I don't think I've needed to. I've seen various techniques for pinning hoops. People would, let me just get a piece of, we'll put this bit of fabric back in there and I'll just talk about it momentarily. Doesn't matter that there's already a design in there. So a lot of people will, we had some pins open here, Rachel.
I was being tidy and close them up, Gary.
A lot of people will pin the fabric to the stabilizer, or they'll not actually hoop the fabric, then they'll pin the fabric to the stabilizer. I've seen people do this, take a T-pin and pin it through. I'll try and get in, have pins all around the stabilizer like this. We'll just pull that up. I think that's just difficult and not necessary in most cases. We also have these pins, Rachel, which I haven't used before.
Pins. We use them in quilting, Gary.
So I'm not a quilter, right?
I quite like fork pins. They are useful and they are an option.
So you would do the same thing, I guess? You
could. They are at a slight angle. It's a different style of pin.
Let me just.
But again, I don't pin either. I've never needed to.
So pinning around the perimeter of the design. Now the problem with pins, of course, depending on the fabric, is you will leave holes. Some fabrics will leave a marked pinhole, and you just got to be mindful of that. This fabric won't. It'll close up again without any dramas. Another people use pins. I've got a larger pin here. I'm just going to try that T-pin. Is they'll actually pin on around the hoop. Hopefully, I'll just put this in and show you, but they'll go like this.
So this is on the outside.
On the outside of the hoop.
Yep.
And they'll actually put the pin down around, the fabric there, and that is designed to prevent the fabric from pulling down through the hoop, which is, what we'd explained before, is one of the reasons I like the double-sided tape around the hoop. I personally think the double-sided tape's a better option and just easier. So
one of the other things that I would use before I even got to pinnings is a basting stitch. Is that just wild and crazy, or? No,
basting stitches. Most machines have an automatic basting stitch now, and by putting a basting stitch down, you are attaching your fabric to the stabilizer quite securely. Now remember, when you start stitching a design, a good design will also have underlay stitches, which also goes to firmly attaching the fabric to the stabilizer to prevent the fabric from sort of pushing away or moving around on the stabilizer, and they build a foundation for the design. But no, look, for me personally, I'm not a huge pinner of designs. If I had a fabric that I felt needed to be more secured to the stabilizer, one of the things I would do is, if it's suitable for the fabric, is use the iron-on soft away tearaway. I'd put a layer of that as my base foundation for my stabilizer, and then probably if I needed to apply another level of stabilizer just to, if I needed more stability than just one layer of tearaway, I'd just either probably float another layer of stabilizer underneath that. But by attaching your fabric to the iron-on soft away, you are preventing any of that fabric movement, because your soft away won't stretch. It will stay nice and in place. It's a bit like paper. You can't stretch it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then that brings up the question of, you wouldn't use like a maxi size hoop for a 3-inch design, right?
Yes. Big important feature there. So sometimes people will try and stitch small designs on big hoops, and there's a rule I guess that we like to follow, is always use the smallest hoop you can for the job at hand. So if I was stitching out, a 3-inch design, and I decided I was going to put a whole heap of them on my, big, massive hoop, they'll work, and you can, but the bigger the surface area of fabric, the more pull and push becomes an issue. So your fabric will move. It's just the physics of it. So I'd prefer to stitch a 3-inch design in a 4-inch hoop, for instance, and then reposition and re-hoop if I was repeating that design on different parts. So always, always, always use the smallest hoop you can for the job that you're about to do. That will give you the best results every time.
Can I reuse embroidery stabilizers, or do I need to use a new piece for each project?
Well, it's horses for courses there. Some stabilizers you can't reuse. Once you've cut the hole out of them, it's just not practical to repiece them. We do recommend Washaway is one that you can, and in fact we use our water-soluble thread.
Yes.
And you can, if you keep all your Washaway samples,
together.
sew it all together using the water-soluble thread, and you can reuse that. That's quite a usable thing.
Some people also patch with thermoplast or sticky back.
Sticky back stabilizers are a good one, and we'll talk about that just quickly. Obviously we have the Filmoplast product, which is one of the best, and when you stitch with a sticky back stabilizer and you carefully peel the design away, you'll be left with the hole where the design is. It's very easy to cut another small piece of sticky back stabilizer and patch that from behind on the hoop, and then that just gives you more life out of that stabilizer.
Okay. I think we've got another question coming in.
Yep. Vivian just wants to know, how sticky is the stabilizer?
Sticky back stabilizer, it's sticky enough. So this is the Filmoplast product. I can't show you on camera, you won't see it, but this has been around for a long time. It doesn't gum the needle much at all, and
I've actually, my very first embroidery quilt, I did my blocks using Filmoplast. It was fantastic. It did the job.
It is.
Moved. I didn't have any issues.
It is a great product, and it's sometimes not enough stabilizer though, so you might use this in your hoop or in a hoop that's designed for sticky back stabilizer. But if I was using it in this hoop here, for instance, if we take that out.
Again, it does depend on the design, right, and the stitch.
It does. If you've got a
density.
big, thick stitch or heavy stitch count, then one layer of this is not going to work. It essentially is a paper which has got a sticky back stabilizer on it. So I would also float a layer of the appropriate stabilizer underneath the hoop as well. So if I was on a knit fabric, I'd have a layer of cutaway underneath to support the design into the future. This one's not open, but we would just peel that out, peel off the backing paper, put it in the hoop as you would any other piece of stabilizer, and then you just stick your fabric down on it. Some people will hoop this with the backing paper still on, and then score a mark around on the inside of the hoop and then peel the backing paper off. For me, when the backing paper is left on, it doesn't sit in the hoop terribly well. The paper is a bit rigid, the backing paper, and I prefer to actually put the whole...
I'm going to confess, Gary, I do that.
Do you?
Yeah, just because I don't like to clean all those hoops.
Well, I don't clean them, I just pass them to someone.
But that was when I was doing my quilt, so I had a lot of hoopings, and I went, I'm not going to...
That's the downside.
This is what we do, right?
That is the downside. The sticky stuff left on the hoop can be a bit problematic, and your eucalyptus oils and that sort of thing take it off pretty well. Orange oil.
I understand that.
But it's pretty sticky, and always, if you're going to use a sticky back stabilizer, and a lot of people are tempted to use it on towels, just test the towel first to make sure that the nap of the towel doesn't get caught and too aggressively.
We've got a whole series of questions on towels.
Oh, okay, we'll get to that then. Now, talking of sticky backs,
yes,
you wanted to tell me something.
I wanted to let you know that I've played with the dye and peel and stick sticky back, and it's fabulous. The paper is slightly heavier, but it was a brilliant product, and I actually like it better than the film.
Yeah, well, that's saying something, because this is a great product, and but that extra bit of thickness in the paper, I think, is giving more stability, and it's coming on convenient roll sizes too. So that will be arriving very soon. It is on our website already, so you can check the dime.
They also have these new labels, which I like. I don't know if you can see this. So it's called the Forever Label System. So you've got you can see it's
Yeah,
in green and it
labels it, yeah.
says, hey, it's peel and stick. So if you lay your stabilizers
Yeah.
in a cupboard,
That's cool. I like
it
that.
is pretty cool.
I also like our slap bands. I should mention
Yeah,
that.
I actually have one for you. I thought, didn't want to get violent, but
this
that's
is
for
the big one.
to go with
So
the bracelet collection.
yeah. Got to wear my granddaughter made me a bracelet. I promised I would wear it until it was no longer wearable. So
I think I'm going to call them a multi-purpose tool because they're going to be.
You can wear them as a bracelet if you like,
or
but they work a treat. You just pop them around like so. That's the bigger one. That's a massive one, but the smaller ones are actually fine for most rolls, and they're so affordable too. So we just go bang bang, and that just holds that all nicely, and you can write on them if you wish. But slap bands, amazing, great product. Definitely recommend them for maintaining your stabilizers. All right, so
now I've got some questions about magnetic hoops.
Ah, yes, okay.
There's a couple, I'm sure. Well, I'll give you the three. When would you avoid using a magnetic hoop? Brother has the flare or a V-shaped one. The V-shaped one is heavier but seems to have a better hold. These are kind of the questions that were written to me. Yeah, let's go with those two. And then I think Nicole's indicated that she's got another question from
previous
the audience.
subject,
From live now.
Oh yeah, we'll go with that first, yeah.
Ellen just wants to know if the new dime magnetic hoops would be good for her VE 2300.
They will indeed. I'm going to show you one of those in just a moment. In fact, so the reason we're talking about hoops is it's all fundamentally part of the whole stabilizing process, and the more stable the hoop, the more stable the attaching of the fabric to the hoop, the better the result's going to be. So as Rachel just mentioned in that question, we've got a few different types. So Brother have now released their own range of magnetic hoops, and this is the 5x7 or 130 by 180 standard magnetic frame. All the Brother machines with a slide-on mechanism will work with that, and they have little removable magnets that just pop off like so. Hopefully you can see that on camera, yes. And they're quite a slimline hoop, and I like the fact that they do have all these separate magnets, which is kind of cool. But if we were to put that piece of fabric down, again, it has been embroidered, but that doesn't matter. It's just, we just slide the magnets on like so, and then they just sit there like that. And that holds it. Whoops, get it the right way.
Key is no unscrewing and having to press them.
Yeah, look, convenience, they hold well, they're very slimline, and if you have a Brother machine with a slide-on mechanism, they're brilliant, they're recognised by the machine. We do also have a similar size frame, a Brother frame for the clip-on hoops, if you have one of the machines with a clip-on device. But I love magnetic frames. They are designed to work with the modern machines. They're not going to damage the machine. They do carry some warning labels, all of them, that they are not good to have around pacemakers. So if you do have a pacemaker, don't do this. And they're a pinch hazard. So if you get your fingers caught, you can sort of pinch your fingers very, very easily. But that's one style, and they're specifically for the Brother models. I don't think we brought the big one in, Rachel, did we? The quilting magnetic frame?
No.
Yeah.
Maybe someone will grab it for us.
Maybe, yeah, someone's listening outside. We'll bring it in for us, hopefully. That's the big Brother quilt frame, guys, whoever's watching in the showroom. and it's a very much more heavy-duty frame,
yes.
And it's a V shape. So when you're putting a thick quilt sandwich in there, it's going to hold a lot better, and it allows you to.
It's actually an angle.
It is an angle, and it does allow you to slide your fabric, and by leaving a couple of the magnets in position, and you can slide your fabric to your next position, which is great if you're doing continuous borders. You're not actually unhooping, so I really like that product. So, but the big question just then was, what about the new dime frames? Now, the dime product has been around for a long time. We did start talking with them many years ago, and then COVID hit and everything went pear-shaped, and we're now back ready to become the distributor for Dime, or we are the distributor for Dime in Australia. And their magnetic hoops, they've got them for the Brother, the Janome, and the Husqvarna FAF and Bernina models, and we're carrying pretty much all of those now. So if you have a Husqvarna, Pfaff, Bonina or Janome, we can actually help you with the magnetic frames. And the way they work is instead of a series of smaller magnets, they're one complete magnetic frame. And again, I'll just take a piece of fabric here. This will do us. Pop that into position. I haven't got any stabilizer on this, but I'm just showing you how it works. And all you do is pop that into position. Oops, I'll just get that roughly where I want it to be. Whoops. You see it jumps away from you? I'm just going to pull that out to position there. I've got no stabilizer on here, but nonetheless, it just clamps on like so, and it's held everything as you would need it. Take that off, you just simply pull the magnetic frame up and Bob's your uncle. And this will slide on just on the Brother machines, just like a normal Brother frame, and the machine will recognize the size of it. So they're going to be in stock very, very soon, a huge range of different sizes, and we have them all, and as well as for the different models.
You can pre-order though.
Yes, you can pre-order, and of course your platinum prices is discounts for all that. And the big thing is we will have them in stock, and you know, we know a lot of folks have actually bought them directly from America over the years, and you've paid a fortune in shipping and freight, and that's no longer the case because we will actually have them here, along with a whole heap of other dyeing products that we're going to show you in due course. So I like magnetic frames, and I think the convenience of them is definitely worth the money that you would spend on them. You'll get a great result.
I've got another question that came in this morning. It's a long one, so I'll read you the whole lot, but I think the initial question is probably the real issue, and maybe a magnetic hoop will be the answer. But I seem to always have a problem with this stabilizer. It's a see-through cutaway, always puckering or shrinking the design when removed from the hoop. It doesn't seem to make a difference between a dense design or a very open design, or even this type of fabric's light or heavier. I've always had issues with this stabilizer regardless of the fabrics or designs. Some people have said to give it a light iron before using that, but it doesn't seem to work either. So I think it's this, I have a puckering problem with this stabilizer once I've removed the design from my hoop. So I think we're using the see-through cutaway.
Yeah, so the see-through cutaway, we do recommend pre-shrinking the see-through cutaway first, giving it a good dose of heat from your iron, just to make sure there's no shrinkage going to happen after the event. Commonly, what can happen is if you've got a design with a heavy stitch count, you will get a settling of the design. So there will be a tendency for it to want to settle and contract. If your tensions on your machine are a little bit on the tight side, that will also have that same effect. So your thread can actually get stretched while you're actually sewing, particularly if it's a big stitch count design. And then it will contract a little bit, so that contributes to it. But definitely, I know she mentioned she'd already pre-shrunk it. I'd be curious to make sure that we have got enough heat in that to pre-shrink it.
Probably it's not maybe the right stabilizer.
It's quite possible. See-through,
depending again on the design, the garment, or the fabric.
I am more a fan of the standard cutaway than I am the see-through cutaway, to be perfectly honest. Our standard medium cutaway is so heavily used in the commercial industry because it's just such a reliable product. It is a bit heavier though, so you do tend to get a little bit more bulk in your design. There
are a lot of quilt designers, or in the hoop projects that use see-through cutaway, but I don't use it. I use a different option.
Look, specifically without seeing what you're doing, I can't answer that question, but pre-shrinking is important, and on the see-through cutaway, and not going too big a stitch count on it. That's the other thing. And just check your tensions on your machines. If your tension, as I said, if it's running on a bit on the tight side, it's going to compound that issue. And I'm not sure what sort of hoop were we using there.
Doesn't say.
Doesn't say. Look, I don't know what machine it is. Magnetic hoops will probably hold better, and that will help prevent that pulling and
but also
pushing.
love to help you. Maybe send some images through on our website to support, and we can help problem solve.
Absolutely.
So we need to see what you're embroidering.
And that goes for anyone. If you've got an issue that you're not understanding, the best thing you can do is send us pictures through.
So the picture helps us solve the problem.
It does. Yeah. And we will always follow up on those things. And the other thing we like to do is if a picture doesn't tell us enough, we'll often FaceTime with you and see what's actually going on, give you some recommendations on how to resolve that particular problem. So yeah, probably follow us up with some pictures, I think would be the best thing.
Do you want to have a look at that
I
sash
can.
frame?
So one of our team did bring in this Big Brother magnetic sash frame, which is a brand new one. I'm sure we had an open one out there somewhere. But let's take it out. Anyways, I just want to show you the difference in the magnets.
And also in the shape.
Yeah. So these are available for both the multi-needle Brother machines and the Luminaires, and I think, is it Stelliers use these as well? I can't remember.
The Stellier does have a version of the style of hoop,
So I'll just try and get this under the camera. So I don't know if you can see, but these, there you go. See how they're V-shaped? And if you're an avid quilter and you have a machine that suits one of these hoops, absolutely recommend it. You will love it. There's a couple of different sizes available. And they actually, without opening this whole thing up, you might just see that there, they clip over this little V section on the frame. So it's a really solid, robust frame. And once they're in place, man, nothing moves under that.
So the V gives it more traction?
Yes, it does, yeah. Absolutely. I'm pretty sure we have a video on our website for that product, so I'd recommend going and having a look at it if you've got one of the machines that will suit this style, because they are quite an awesome hoop. Not the cheapest hoop in the market, but
so the answer to that question is the shape. The V shape does give it a bit stronger hold.
If you're doing quilt sandwiches, absolute game changer. Yeah, for sure. So definitely worth looking at. I'll pop that back in there, and someone can deal with that a little bit later. Probably me when I'm done. Get rid of that. Okay.
So the next we're moving on to towels and projects. I've grouped these. So there's a lot on towels. What stabilizer do I use to hoop a towel? Why can't you use a tearaway on towels? When doing towels, what is the best stabilizer to use? Okay.
You know what I didn't say right at the very start is there is no absolute right and wrong for anything we're talking about. There's guides. I've had people who have had stunning results doing things that I would never do, but that doesn't mean to say they're right or wrong. If you find a technique that works for you and you're happy with it, then you can't argue. Carry on if that's working for you.
Yep.
Now, typically on towels, and this is just an old sample I dug out.
Gary, I also want to say, and are you going to show it with some of the other things, is that we test a lot. And I know that even before I worked for Echidna, I tested a lot with everything that I did because I didn't want to ruin my masterpiece. So maybe test more as well before
absolutely.
Leaping in.
Absolutely, and I think it's always handy if you like embroidering towels to have an old towel that just becomes your test towel and stitch out every sample test on it and check that, does it need to have, if the stitch count's very big, does it need more stabilizer than you might think, or should you use knockdown stitches? That's another story. We're not going to get into that now. We love knockdown stitches though, and we've got videos on that information. But in this case, we've just got a simple towel. It's an old sample. It was done without knockdown stitches, but nonetheless, reasonable stitch count on these designs, the 4 little ducks there. And we used on this, we would have used wash away. So I didn't want any stabilizer left in the back of the towel. That's a reasonably stable towel. And a lot of people say, well, if the towel is stable, why do I need stabilizer at all? You've got to stabilize the movement of the fabric or the flagging of the fabric during the stitching process. If you don't do that, you will get misstitches and broken threads and thread knots and twists and all sorts of things. So you do need stabilizer irrespective. And on this case, the wash away was enough to stabilize the towel, get a good result, and of course there's no stabilizer left in the back of it.
And often we would use 2 layers of wash away, not just one.
Two layers, absolutely. And that means it's going to stitch really well. It's not going to be bulky to use. The last thing you need is a towel that's got a big design on it that feels like a piece of cardboard. It's not very comfortable to use.
I know some people have said to me, oh, but I don't want to wash the towel before I give it, but we just trim it right back. So you trim it right back to the design, and then give whoever you're gifting it to the care instructions.
suggest that they wash it
knows.
before the first use, which is normal practice anyway, I think. And of course, we used a topping on top of that as well. So we used the Super Solve water-soluble topping, which tears off quite easily without any drama at all.
And important for a pile.
Yes, because you don't want the nap of the pile of the towel coming through the stitching. So you can use either your water-soluble, I mean, you could even use wash away, but that's a bit of an overkill as a topping. So your
What
water
about heat away?
Heat away is great too.
Yep,
Heat away is
just hit it with an iron.
you hit it with an iron. Don't go too aggressive on top with the iron because you don't want to glaze your stitches. So you're just rubbing a hot iron over there. But in a design like this, and I pointed out, and we just come back up to the top here. It's a fairly clean, simple design. There's not a lot. There's no open space in there. So if I was using heat away or Super Solve on top, it'll just perforate away and there'll be nothing left at all. So it'll just whatever's left under the stitches. So so towels are very simple. Now, of course, how would you stabilize this? If you're lucky enough to have a commercial machine or you've got magnetic hoops, it's really easy to stabilize a towel. If you don't, and you've just got your standard kind of domestic type hoops like this, it can be a little challenging because the hoops are not terribly thick. And so the last thing you need is a towel pulling out of your hoop halfway through the design. So the suggested way there is to just baste the towel onto your stabilizer and using one of your built-in basting stitches if you have a machine with built-in basting stitches. In other words, you'd put your wash away in the hoop, 2 layers of wash away in the hoop, position your towel on the wash away and then run your basting stitch.
You could maybe show them.
I could, yes. So if we take 2 layers, we've got some scissors there.
Sure do.
I'm going to cut enough to do a fold over there. That will do me, thank you. There we go, and I'll just fold this over in 2. Whoops.
And this is our most frequent way of hooping towels.
On a domestic machine with domestic hoops, definitely. So I'm going to open the frame up enough to put the stabilizer in. We'll move this out the way. Pop that down, hopefully that's on camera. Yep.
Gary, you should mention that mat. It's one of the greatest things I've started playing with.
This is one of the new Dime products, the pink mat. It's just a really thin silicon mat, and it's a non-slip mat. So if you want a mat you can take to classes or just have somewhere you can fold up easily and get it out of the way, it's a great way to do it. So we now have that stabilizer nice and firmly in the hoop. It's 2 layers of wash away. And what we would do is we probably would have marked our towel wherever we want a design to stitch. And you would just position your towel where you want it. Obviously this would be on the machine, and then your first stitch, you'd go to your basting selection, choose your basting stitch, and it will run a nice clean basting stitch around where the design is about to stitch, and that's usually pretty much enough to keep that all secure for you. I would also obviously put my topping on top, which would be your water soluble or your heat away. If you have a machine that's got, you know, a multi-needle machine, your hoops are going to be thicker and they will accommodate towels far better than the standard domestic machines. But if you're lucky enough to have a magnetic frame, if we were doing this on, say, I'm making a mess here, Rachel, I've got hoops everywhere. You can take that.
Give me the hoops.
Move that towel out the way. Let's take this dime frame and pop that there, pop that there. We can put this down, position our towel where we want it, and then just feel for where the frame mechanism is. There it is right there. And that's now in position. So we've hooped up there we go. Hooped up our towel, all set to go.
That's a real benefit for a magnetic hoop.
It is far easier, and taking that off is easy. Now, if you've got a multi-needle machine, I'm sure some of you will be watching, you've got the Maggie frames as well, although I don't want to take this out until I talk about that, so
maybe we'll talk about it later.
We'll come back to that later, yeah, but the Maggie frames are great and they hold fantastically, and we will show you that in a few moments. So nonetheless, towels and magnetic frames are great.
Awesome. The next part of towels and projects is what stabilizer do I use for in the hoop projects and quilts. So I think that kind of brings me on.
Yes, it does.
Because I did some testing of these new dime products, and I know you can probably fiddle those around. I've got a couple of new dime stabilizers that I've used for these in-hoop projects, and I love them. One is Piece and Stitch Stabilizer, which is for an in-the-hoop project, and I believe it's that one.
Yep.
I've used both of these, and I've washed that one and not washed this one. That one's a Ricky Timms, which is a similar, it's called a stable stuff poly, but they're both soft, so if you can kind of...
They are quite flexible,
They're
aren't
very,
they?
very soft. And design, absolutely, the Piece and Stitch Stabilizer is for in the hoop. The Ricky Timms, which is the kite, is for hand and machine applique, as well as foundation piecing, and they are wonderful and soft, and I'll use them in a heartbeat. I'm going to change to these products myself, rather than anything that we've got.
You were very excited about it, Rachel, I've got to be honest.
I was like, wow, this is a game changer for me, because I do a lot of sewing applique as well. I do foundation piecing, not just machine embroidery, and I think both of these dime products are fantastic for
So what we
those.
established when you were explaining what you liked about it is that you can tear it.
You can tear it. They call it a tearaway.
But and I'm not sure that this is going to necessarily show very well on camera, but it's quite a...
It doesn't add bulk.
It doesn't add bulk. It
No.
remains soft, and you can tear it away, but it doesn't perforate.
And it's very supple, and it eventually will wash away. So both products do have different applications, but for in the hoop, this is what I would use.
So just
and
clarifying
going
then, in the hoop you would use the
Piece and Stitch Stabilizer by Dime.
Piece and Stitch by Dime.
And if I'm doing my sewing things and my foundation piecing, but you can also use this for in the hoop as well. This is the Ricky Timms Soft and Stable Stuff Poly.
And they will be in stock in about early July. So once that shipment arrives and we get it all unpacked and...
But I think they're fabulous, and I like the fact that these are soft. You don't have to wash it, and when you do, they will gradually wash out. So I'm a quilter too. In the hoop quilting, this is just no. Sometimes wash away, if you use a wash away, it can get a bit gluey. I don't like that. You don't need to worry about that with these products.
Fantastic. So that's coming soon.
Coming soon, yeah.
All right. What else did we have to...
Fabric. So the best stabiliser to use on stretch, you broadly spoke about it with cutaway, stabiliser for t-shirt.
Yeah, can I just say on the stretch fabric then, ideally if it's a simple t-shirt or polo shirt, then a layer of cutaway hooped well with a layer of topping on top will give you a good result. I'm going to show you a bad result right now. I don't know where this came from, but it'll never see the light of day after this. If I just hold that up, I don't know if you can see that really well, but that's just a terrible result. It's the problem is it's just a really basic t-shirt, a very, very big stitch count design, stabilized with a no-show mesh, and it's just not enough stability for a start for that size design. But the problem with this is, you can see there's a lot of landlocked areas in this, and by that I mean areas that are completely engulfed with stitches, not enough stabilizer, too much pull and push going on, and too big a design really for that application. And you do have to consider what design you're using on the application that you have. A heavy stitch count design in a small area on a knit is generally a recipe for disaster. And here's one that is not so bad, but even it has its little problem. It's a good design and it stitches beautifully. Whoops, I'll put it under here, this way. But it's got a kind of a concave sort of look to it, and that's how it's going to sit when it's worn. Too many stitches in that small design for that application on a knit fabric. It just won't sit well. And even though it's been stabilized with, again, a see-through or a no-show mesh, It's the stitch count that is the problem in that size. It just will have that kind of convex.
So you would have had more success with a cutaway, not a no-show mesh.
I probably cutaway would have been more stable, but I still think
it would have had that concave
on that knit application. It's because of the heavy stitch count in a small area. It's still going to have that kind of concave sit. It's just not going to sit great. This design is one of the brother designs off the Luminaire, and it's one of the Disney designs. It's a big design. It's on a polo or a sweatshirt or a fleecy jumper. And let's have a look. It's got a layer of, I'm not sure, that's looks like a see-through again. But the design, even though it's a big design, it's well structured. It doesn't have a lot of sort of loose open area in the middle. And it was just stitched really well. Tensions would have been right on the machine. There's no registration loss. And so you can get good results. You've just got to stabilize well enough. I suspect I can't hardly see, but there's probably another layer of tearaway.
I think there's two. There's a layer of tearaway.
So there's a couple of layers on this. There was a layer of soft away on top or floated underneath as well. I can see little remnants of it. So the layer of the see-through cutaway and another layer of soft away underneath that gave it that extra stability to stop a lot of that pull and push that would have gone on. But nonetheless, it was a good result and will sit beautifully without any problems. Another old sample we dug out was this knitted scarf, and simple design, but nonetheless this can be complex to stitch. And on this one we would have used, I can't see too much left in it, but it was a soft away tearaway on that. We didn't overhoop this, we didn't stretch the fabric, we just secured it beautifully with the soft away tearaway, and the design doesn't have a lot of stitches. So if we'd have put a big heavy set design on there, it probably wouldn't look that great. So you've got to pick the design for the application. So often we see people have a result that is just terrible, but it's just the design doesn't suit the application. And that's just experience.
I'm going to do a little plug for our online beginners machine embroidery course here too, because we do show you how to hoop a whole bunch of variety of different fabrics, specialty fabrics. So if you're not sure, maybe consider doing that, because you'll get really confident going through that course. Best stabilizer to use on satin?
Yeah, look, that's a hit and miss. Satin varies in qualities. One of the hardest things to embroider. So I did play around with some stuff yesterday to try and show you. So
we've got one question before you leap into this, because this is a bit of a story.
Yep.
Nicole.
Ellen would just like to know, would any of those use an iron-on stabilizer, or when would you use an iron-on stabilizer?
Iron-on stabilizer. So iron-on stabilizer, the benefit of that is if you've got a fabric that's likely to be slippery or difficult to manage, that's a great time to use iron-on stabilizer. To be perfectly frank, you could just about use the iron-on soft away on almost anything you're going to embroider, as long as the fabric allows you to release the stabilizer. Some fabrics don't very easily. And with the iron-on soft away stabilizer, by reheating it gently, you can usually peel it off most fabrics. So it's worthwhile doing a little test on that, as long as you need to remove the stabilizer. In some applications you may not need to, so you just leave it there, it doesn't really matter.
But it does provide good support. I think it's really important to understand that.
Well, here's the best way to look at it. I mean, if I just take this bit of satin here, I don't know, if we go to the top camera, there's no stability in that fabric. It's even though it's a woven fabric, it's slippery, it's going to slide around in the hoop. If I have a look at our iron-on soft away, this is it here, it's attach this to the back of this satin, the fabric can't slip and slide, it can't move, and that's, in fact, that's what I used on this particular sample I've got here. Is I've done the same letter B under different circumstances using different backings, and even for me, doing this as I did yesterday, there were things that I changed as I sort of tested it. So the very first stitch out I did here, which you can see, I'll try and get this up closer. So, whoops, it's so there's a little bit of fabric pull and push going on there.
Especially around the bottom curl. And
Now that was done on a domestic machine using one layer of iron-on soft away and I didn't change anything on the machine. I just went to the machine and stitched it without any changes at all.
You'd be a little disappointed with that, wouldn't you?
I would be. I'd be going, oh, that's a little bit of problem there. A lot of it is a little bit of puckering, but also fabric displacement. So fabric displacement is, as we mentioned with those clowns, it's like jumping into a bathtub, Rachel. If you jump into a bathtub, you displace the water. Yeah. Some of us displace more than others. But if you put a needle through fabric, you push the fabric out of position and then you replace it with thread. So the fabric can't go back to where it was, and you end up with what looks like a puckered effect, but is actually displacement of the fabric, and that's really hard to stop. So less needle penetrations is often better. Now, moving along, I went and thought, all right, well, I'll try that on one of my multi-needle machines. So the next was on a multi-needle machine, a little bit better, but not what I wanted, and still a little bit of puckering and development around there. I then went across to here, the next couple, that's these ones, and I stitched them using the Brother magnetic frames on the same domestic sewing machine, and it came up a little bit better held. And then I thought, all right, well, what's the best result? And at this stage, I'm still using an iron-on stabilizer, the iron-on soft away. And then I added, I'll take this hoop out in a minute, but then I added, I'll go to this one here, I floated a layer of soft away underneath as well, because it still is quite a delicate fabric and a very inexpensive satin. It's quite fine. And I put a topping on top, and we started to get a much better result. This is using heat away. So if I peel that heat away, you'll see we've got far less puckering. Still tiny bit, you can't avoid everything, but that's using an iron-on soft away, which is quite a light product, and I floated a layer of soft away underneath it as well, right there.
When do you know, so you know to float, I float a bit.
You float a bit?
But in terms of stabilizer, to float, you knew from here that you should float more.
Yeah.
It needed more support.
More support.
That is a sign, the wrinkling is the sign that you need more support.
Yeah, more support. And I should also mention, by the time I got to this stage as well, I had determined, looking at my samples, that my tension was too tight. Okay. And so the tighter the tension on a delicate fabric, the more it's going to pull on the fabric, the more you're going to get. Every stitch is going to pull the fabric in and give you that little kind of puckered effect.
And I'm making the assumption that you changed your needles too, right, for these?
I just went to my machine. Okay. I'm just using an Embroidery 75 needle. Temptation is
you changed, so you used a fresh 7511 needle on a satin?
Yes.
You would do that?
You would on a satin, because you don't want any damage on that needle point. And the temptation is to go to a lighter needle, of course, a sharp point needle. But if you do that and you're using a 40 weight thread, the eye of the needle on a size 70 or 65 needle is very fine. And that causes another set of problems. So I've just used a 7511 embroidery needle.
And a fresh one, because you'll pierce the fabric better.
And so anyway, that result there was quite good. I'd be very happy with that. And then I went back to my multi-needle machine using a magnetic frame, lightened the tension, and before everyone jumps up and down and says, oh, I don't want to touch my tension, tensions are adjustable, and they're adjustable for a reason, and that is so you can adjust them. A lighter stitch on satin will mean that you're not going to get that pulling, tunneling effect of a satin stitch. So if I take this bit of heat away off, and it just peels off beautifully, and you can hit it with a heat gun or just run a mini iron over it, and it'll just dissipate. And we'll take that out of the hoop, and we'll put that down there. And I'll show you on the back, there's my extra layer of soft away, that's the non-fusible, so we'll peel that off. And I can pick out those bits quite easily.
I just want to say, with these pieces, when you pulled them off, I just cut them up again so I can use them for my floaters and put them in a bag. That's the best way to reuse the offcuts of your soft away if you want floaters.
And that was a good question before too. So floating something, you can use all your offcuts. Wonderful, yeah. And this has got the fusibles soft away. Now it's peeling off quite easily, but what I find is a good idea is just to gently warm that with the iron, and it will peel off a little bit easier. But check that, because different fabrics will react differently. So anyway, that's how that comes off. But let's have a look at the top of it now. And It's near on perfect. Like I couldn't get a better result. So, you know, you can achieve results. You've just got to think about it. And in this case, on this product, it was the lighten the tension, fresh needle, stabilize the fabric with the iron-on stabilizer, the iron-on soft away, and then float a layer of soft away underneath it, and it's a perfect result.
And the heat away on top.
And the heat away, or even the wash away, the super solve.
Yep.
Heat away for me is easy because I don't have to wet it to get it away, but and most of that will just peel away. I did also give my heat away because I only used a little patch. I didn't put it in the hoop with the product. I used the 505 spray, a very light piece of spray of this, just to hold the heat away in place while I was embroidering it. So I've seen some satin bathrobes and things embroidered, and they're so badly done with so much puckering that it's like you're better off not having it. But you'll definitely get a great result if you get those three things right.
Good tips for satin, thank you.
Good tips for satin, but any fabric really. It's just, it is a lot of common sense in thinking about what you're trying to achieve. As I said earlier, there's no absolute right or wrong. There's what works, and it does vary for people for whatever reason. I don't know why it varies so much, but
so that brings us to our final little category, our last 4 questions. And that's comparing stabilizers. So the first one is, do I really need a stabilizer?
Yes. Okay.
Do I?
So fundamentally, and I mentioned it, but I'm going to actually dwell on it for a couple of minutes. Fundamentally, if you don't stabilize your fabric, as your needle goes down through the fabric during the stitching process, the fabric will flag. Flagging is when the needle comes back up, it drags the fabric with it, goes back down and it drags it, and you get this thing going on. That will cause missed stitches, thread breakages, needle breakages if you're unlucky, poor compensation, poor outline registration, and bird's nesting if you're unlucky as well.
And a lot of unhappiness, and you think it's the machine.
Unnecessary unhappiness.
Yes.
The amount of times I've had people ring me and say, I've had enough with this machine, it's terrible. And again, controversially, I'm going to say this, most issues with thread breaking or stabilizer or registration loss or anything, it's very rarely the machine. It's almost never the machine, to be honest. It's always the ingredients, or the process that you've chosen to use, or the design. So, the ingredients is the design. Yeah. Is it the right needle? Have you got the right stabilizer? Have you hooped it correctly? Have you placed the design correctly? Have you done all those things right? And if you have, and you know the tension is set for what you're doing, you'll get a great result.
You've covered this, but maybe just give us a summary. Why would you use cutaway as opposed to tearaway?
Cutaway in the longevity of the garment. So if you've got a garment that's going to be laundered and worn, cutaway does provide longevity in that process. All that extra, you know, imagine a kid's shirt, you know, you're going to throw it in the wash, they're going to go run around the garden, and you know, you're going to really work that garment. Cutaway gives that stability to keep the design well structured and sitting correctly in the fabric for a long time. So if you're never going to do that, then and providing the stitching process doesn't perforate the tearaway, you know, you could use tearaway. It's not going to make too much of a difference, but cutaway will actually give you longevity.
One person says, if I use a hot iron, the cutaway tends to cause waves on my stitch out. What product am I best to use because of this? I'm a patch worker.
Make sure you've pre-shrunk your cutaways first. I can't stress that enough. I think, you know what, for patch workers, I think if you change to this dime product, I'm pretty with everything you've told me, Rachel. Yeah,
I'm impressed.
I'd give it a crack.
Try this as a different option.
Yeah, but pre-shrink, make sure you do that.
When do I use sticky back stabilizer?
Sticky back stabilizer, the ideal application for that is when you really don't have an option to hoop the item. Sometimes you maybe need to embroider on the corner of something, or that you can't. So something that can't or shouldn't be hooped?
Yeah. Like, what about a piece of leather on a bag?
Yeah, you're not going to hoop a piece of leather, so sticky back is great for that. Anything that can't be easily hooped or it won't stay in the hoop, sticky back is fantastic. Be mindful that you don't want it to become the norm. And despite saying that the good ones don't gum up the needle, you are still stitching through glue, whichever way you look at it. And your needle heat can get excessively hot during a stitching process. that can actually take a bit of the glue, carry it around on the needle, on the thread, and it deposits in places you don't want it. As I said, the ones we sell are good, the Filmoplast, and of course the new Dime product are very good, but it's still glue, and use it when you have to, but don't become the norm. That's my advice on sticky back.
That's all my questions. I think we've got one more from our audience, so Nicole's going to ask that.
Vivian just wants to know what type of threads you use.
We use primarily Hemingworth for most of our things.
Yeah, this one we prepared earlier.
And you know, it's a great product. It's a polyester, 100% tri-label polyester, similar to, you know, any of the other great products out there. There's a lot of good polyester threads. I prefer polyester embroidery thread over rayon. Rayon is not as popular as it once was, and I guess the thing to remember there is in the early days of our home embroidery, rayon was pretty much all you could get.
Yeah, sure was.
Polyester didn't have that same luster and sheen, but it does now, in fact, probably better. Your benefits with polyester is it's 100% colour fast. It breaks less, it's stronger, got more tensile strength. You can use your polyester embroidery thread as a construction thread if you want to, but just bear in mind that it does have a little bit more stretch in it than, say, a standard sewing thread. But if you're an embroiderer, you're going to have a whole range of colours, and so you've got all these colours you can use in other applications if you particularly want to, because polyester embroidery thread is quite strong from a tensile strength point of view. And the benefit with Hemingworth, of course, is they all come with the cap system. So, you know, you've got your little cap and the thread pops out. Well, this one's not been taken out yet, but it pulls out through the cap. When you're finished with it, you just put the little silicone plug back in and put it back in.
We've got great videos on how to use our Hemingworth threads.
And of course, you might want to get,
out.
I don't know, we can't, Rachel, just step aside for a moment. You get the Hemingworth cabinets, and you can store all your shades, 300 shades in those cabinets, and you're never wanting for thread. It's all numbered, you know exactly where they are, so well worthwhile looking at.
Well, that's our load of questions. I think, Gary, if anyone makes an order.
Yes, we thought today check our website and all these stabilizers. Some of the Dime product is up there and orderable, but it is back ordered until we actually release it. But you can start ordering the product now.
Check out our education for beginners embroidery.
Indeed. And any orders placed today till midnight tonight, we're going to include one of our little, as well as our normal things that we do, because we always give you something for free. We'll also include one of our embroidery static sticker sets, so you can plaster them all over your machine or wherever you want to put them and peel them off again at some stage. So that's a little bonus extra today as well. I think did we miss anything, Rachel?
No, I think we covered. Did we miss anything too?
We didn't cover every stabilizer in the range, but we do have I think we still have a stabilizer guide online, so you can access that. We've got a stabilizer
project. We've got a few things.
Oh yeah, you can get that. That's a good way to do it, isn't it? Yeah. But you know, looking at this, I don't know how many stabilizers we have online now. There's dozens and dozens and dozens. We also have bulk rolls, which are good to deal with. Lots of tulles and organzas that have different applications. We could talk all day about stabilizers, but I'm sure you guys have all got things to do today, so I think that's about it. I hope you've had some fun. Thanks for stopping by, and until next time, happy embroidering. Cheers.
Bye.
you.